Mr Bryan.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I should say that I am a member of the committee, but I'm not, like the previous speakers, been there during the course of the consideration of the report we're discussing today, so I can't speak with the same authority as those speakers. But I am absolutely on board with the approach. In a culture debate a few weeks ago, I gave a number of examples of organisations which take this approach in my own constituency, as well as stating that, to state the obvious, that we all want to see culture in Scotland thrive, and not just for economic reasons. Those are very important, but also for the difference it can make to people's lives. But we do need to be clear, listening to the last speech, the biggest obstacle in the way of the implementation of many of the recommendations in this report is the extremely limiting financial situation we are in as a country, and the report rightly mentions that. In my view, the current financial restraints facing Scotland are perhaps the starkest we have seen since this Parliament was established. And we need to be really explicit with the people of Scotland. We can all shout about it must be sustainable multi-year funding. If that's not what the Parliament's getting, then how are we going to provide it? Let's be serious about the challenges that we face. And the devolution settlements created a situation where the UK Government still has control over the vast majority of Scotland's finances. And if the UK Government chooses to implement cuts in real terms, as it very often does, then the Scottish Government must make very difficult decisions in order to implement those cuts, either by cutting elsewhere in the Scottish Government's budget or by raising one of the few taxes which the Scottish Government is responsible for, both of which options are virtually always met with universal criticism from the opposition benches. And as for the point about local government, well, local government is obviously constrained, but much less so in Scotland than in England or in Wales. In England, you've had 40% cuts in council budgets. You've had a number of councils going to the wall financially, and we haven't seen that in Scotland. But it is a difficult situation, and we should acknowledge that and the impact it has on a place-based approach to culture. However, the Scottish Government has done and continues to do what it can within the devolution settlement to support a place-based approach to culture in the communities. And I'm also sure that the commitment to double funding for culture and the arts by £100 million over the next 5 years will play a part in furthering this approach. Now, the title of the debate is Challenges and Opportunities. So, where I've highlighted the challenges, I'd also like to try and highlight the opportunities. And oddly, one of the side effects of austerity over the last 14 years has been the increase in community ownership of cultural assets, which we've seen across Scotland, and which the report rightly highlights. During this summer alone, I visited Wimpy Park Community Garden in Alloa, which was recently taken over by Wimpy Park Community Group, a group of residents who had a vision and worked immensely hard to bring it to life. And it's a real example, if those on the committee or elsewhere want to visit it, of cultural empowerment in our communities, indeed in one of our most deprived communities. And this is absolutely to be commended. And that's just one of a few examples in my constituency across Clackmannanshire and Dunblane. Thanks to the work usually of immensely dedicated volunteers and community ownership, many formerly publicly owned spaces have taken on new roles in the community. Tullibody Community Development Trust, which operates the Civic Centre in the town. Community Development Trust, which operates the Hive in Dollar. Dunblane Development Trust, which manages the Braeport Centre. And perhaps best of all, the Sauchie Community Group, which operates the Sauchie Resource Centre, among many others in my constituency. And all of these are used by their communities as spaces for culture, another important aspect of a place-based approach to culture, highlighted in the report. So I welcome the report, and I'd add that one of the most critical aspects of delivering a place-based approach to culture in the communities is by giving the people in those places a significant role in developing and delivering those services. But as a Parliament, we need to be aware of the root causes of the significant financial challenges facing the implementation of the recommendations in this report. And we do not serve the people if we try to ignore the source of those financial constraints. So austerity has been one of the biggest problems, but can I mention another one which was brought home to me today during the committee session that we had with touring musicians, a different category but a very similar challenge. And that was largely Brexit had caused a huge meltdown in that sector. We all heard it, we all heard the evidence. And I asked the participants if the two scenarios that were given about Brexit, one was to have the sunny uplands full of opportunity and no regulation, or the enormous economic and cultural self-harm. And I can tell you it's the latter which characterises their experience since Brexit. And they also said most of the things they are suffering from were predicted at the time of Brexit. And it's honestly to hear it, what you heard were this decimation of the Scottish cultural sector in that area. You heard some Scottish artists continuing, but only if they could get an Irish passport, to appear at Irish events in Germany and elsewhere, not as Scots, but as Irish. That's the only way they could continue. And it was like not an iron curtain, like a theatre curtain coming down on a vitally important part of our cultural heritage. People have lost their jobs, people have walked away from the centre, and that is lost to Scotland now. It's an absolute crime that's going on, and they fairly and squarely laid it at the door of Brexit, although made requests, quite really, as you'd expect them to do, in terms of the Scottish Government and what support they can bring as well. But that is the reality of what our cultural sector's going through. And I would hope that when the very welcome news of the additional £100 million from the Government was mentioned, I would endorse some of those people that we heard from today and their requests that some of that money finds its way to touring musicians, because it is so important for the international reputation of Scotland. It's how the rest of the world views us, and they also made the point very fairly that Scotland, grim as that situation, is over-endowed with talent and artists that can enhance Scotland's reputation. So that would be my main appeal, that the place-based approach which we're talking about today, supporting it, is also done at the same time as we support culture and try and reverse the damage of Brexit that we have seen decimating our cultural sector.